Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willies, your host. Today, we are honored to have economist and Professor Dean Baker. Dean Baker is an American macroeconomics economist who co-founded the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Baker has been credited as one of the first economists to have identified the 2007-2008 United States housing bubble. He was a lecturer at the University of Michigan and an assistant professor of economics at Bucknell University. He was also an economist at Economic Policy Institute. Baker has consulted with officials from the World Bank and provided testimony to the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Congress and the OECD's Trade Union Advisory Council. Senor Professor Dean Baker, thank you so kindly for spending some time with us here at Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks a lot for having me on, Egberto.
Well, look, let me tell you, a lot of folks are currently distressed at the ineptitude of the current control of our economic system. So I have a few questions. One of the reasons I wanted to get to you is you wrote a very important article recently that appeared on Common Dreams. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, you've long warned about economic narratives that mask upward distribution. How do Trump's tariffs, marketed as helping the working class, in reality serve the interests of the wealthy elite or corporate sector?
The biggest part of his big, beautiful bill, as he calls it, was this tax cut for the wealthy, that we're seeing a very large tax cut for the wealthiest people in the country. That's about as clear as you can get in terms of upward redistribution. For ordinary people, provides very little. Now, he was anxious to tout some of what were called populist measures, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, Social Security. Those, you look more closely, those mean very little to the vast majority of working people. No taxes on tips. There's some people in Las Vegas who get a lot of money in tips and they'll make a couple thousand on that maybe. Most tip workers are mostly women working in restaurants. They're getting $20,000-$25,000 a year. They don't pay any taxes. So they're not going to benefit from that. The no tax on overtime, it was just kind of painful. The reason we have overtime, this dates back to the 30s. It was very explicitly put in to discourage companies from forcing workers to put in long hours. And keep in mind, workers don't have a choice. It's not like I'm going to work overtime. Unless you have a union contract that expressly prohibits mandatory overtime, and very few of those these days, your employer tells you you're working 50 hours this week. If you don't like it, get a new job. What we're doing, making that tax-free, is we're subsidizing it. The overtime premium, 50% wage premium, was to penalize employers. Now we're subsidizing them. If you want to help workers who are putting in long hours, why don't we raise the premium to 75%, make it 100%, have it kick in after 38 hours? We could do things to help workers. This is just subsidizing employers who want to make their workers put in long hours. And the Social Security thing, most people getting Social Security benefits already weren't paying income tax. So this helps, you aren't necessarily rich if you're making $60,000 a year and getting Social Security. That's not a rich person, so you'll get a little money out of that. But that's not exactly the working class masses. So this is about giving more money to rich people. I mean, I could go in, there's a lot of, I'll just call it graft in there, these special interest tax cuts that give a chunk to this person or that person or this company. But this is about giving more money to rich people.
Since you went there, there's a particular part of this bill that I found amusing, and maybe you can tell better about it. But somebody who wants to fund let's say a religious school, they can do so via SGOs and get back all the money and capital gains from their stocks. Why don't you explain a little bit about that, how that worked?
This is unbelievable from just about any perspective. So it sets up a system where if you're a wealthy person, wouldn't mean anything to you if you, well, at least relatively well-off person, you could set up, in effect, a fake nonprofit, have the money go as a voucher to your own kids, and get that all tax deductible. So it's kind of, we'd had this policy, you can't, we weren't supposed to have public money for religious schools. And this is a way to have public money go to rich schools and for better off people, because obviously if you're a lower income person earning $20,000-$30,000 a year, this won't benefit you. So it's basically a convoluted way to let rich people have tuition for their kids to religious school get paid for by the government.
It is amazing because if I have the whole bill and I put the whole bill through Chat GPT and I would ask it questions to figure out what part of the bills these different things are. And what's amazing is a lot of what Americans read, they will, when you read the text of the bill, they would not understand the draconian nature of some of these parts about it. But, going back to tariffs, many working class voters support tariffs under the illusion they protect American jobs. Based on your analysis, do these tariffs actually deliver net gains of those workers, or are they being sold some sort of a snake oil? But before you answer, it's interesting because one of the reasons one applies a tariff is to ensure that the prices to some extent go up to give an incentive to build here in America. What's the deal?
Yeah, well, needless to say, Trump has been all over the place on tariffs. So let me just say a little bit about the underlying economics. The argument, if I were making an argument for tariffs, and I'll just say, I was concerned. We can't go back and change the past, but I was very concerned about our trade deals, dating back to NAFTA in the 90s, and then certainly made in China and the WTO in 2000. That would cost us a lot of good-paying manufacturing jobs, and they did. And it's very clear in the data. We lost a huge number of manufacturing jobs, particularly in the first decade of this century. We lost around a third of all manufacturing jobs, and they didn't come back. I mean, this predates, we had the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. This predates that. I mean, we lost more in the Great Recession, but most of the job loss actually was before that. It was because of trade. It's very clear. We had very large trade deficits. China was the biggest actor, but not the only one. And that cost a lot of jobs, and particularly union jobs. So we used to have good-paying union jobs in manufacturing. No longer true. Go back to 1980, 30% of manufacturing jobs were unionized, just 15% in the rest of the private sector. Today, those numbers are 8% for manufacturing and just 6% for the rest of the private sector. So it's still a little higher, but it's really not much different. And as a result of that, jobs in manufacturing are no longer particularly good jobs. So we say, okay, we're going to have tariff barriers to try and encourage more jobs in manufacturing. Well, we might get some more jobs in manufacturing, but there's no reason I think there'll be especially good paying jobs. So what do the tariffs do? They raise prices. And again, this is bizarre because you have Trump insisting, oh, no, it's not going to raise prices. You go, well, if it's not going to raise prices, it's surely not going to lead to more jobs, but it will raise prices. It gives some incentive for companies to manufacture here. But again, it's not clear there'll be especially good paying jobs. So why do we want to pay more for cars, for our steel, for clothes, for so many things we buy that are imported, and even the domestically produced goods, those will go up in price too, to get some number of jobs in manufacturing that aren't especially good paying jobs. As someone, a friend of mine put it, the reason manufacturing had good paying jobs was because of the unions, not because of the factories. So, it's really, this is a tax that hits working people. And again, it's an important point to make that tariffs will disproportionately hit low middle income people because two things. One, they spend a larger share of their money. If you take an Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, they spend a lot of money, but it's a very small share of their income because they couldn't possibly spend their whole income even if they wanted to. But secondly, low middle income people are more likely to spend it on goods that are subject to the tariff rather than services. So you look at higher income people, they're more likely to spend a lot of money on restaurants, vacations, travel, services that are less affected by the tariffs. So this is a very, very regressive tax. It disproportionately hits low middle income people.
Regressive tax meaning, folks, that it's not a progressive tax. It actually affects those of us without means much more than it affects the others. Now, in your article, you highlight the media's failure to contextualize tariffs within the broader class dynamics. Why do you think the mainstream media so often avoids class-based analysis, even when it's central to economic policy? And to add to that, I mean, we all know that if a rich person gets $1,000, it means nothing. If a poor person gets $1,000, it means a hell of a lot of economic activity. Your answer, sir?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, the simplest one is laziness. So they tend to do what everyone else does. So there is, very much a herd mentality. They do the same reporting everyone else does. I've harangued reporters endlessly when they report on budget numbers to express them as a share of the budget. So we hear that, it was a big issue that Trump didn't like AID, the aid program for largely sub-Saharan Africa. It goes to the world, though. An international aid program dates back to the 60s, supported by people, both parties. President Bush and second Bush actually did a great thing. The AIDS program for Africa saved millions of lives. So anyhow, you hear, we spend $25 billion a year on international aid. And a lot of people going, well, I'd like to help them, but $25 billion, that's a lot of money. Well, it's a lot of money to you and me. It's not a lot of money to the federal government. It's about 0.3% of the budget. Yeah. So if they made a point of just saying 0.3% of the budget, again, you don't want to waste 0.3% of the budget, but you'd understand that's not what's making your taxes high. That's not what's preventing us from having universal health care. It's a small item in the budget. And, reporters, I've harangued reporters endlessly about that. None of them try to tell me that anyone knows what 25 billion means. And no one except for my nose is in the budget. We have some number of people, their nose is in the budget. That's not even 1% of the country. So why not just express it? So that's just laziness as best I could tell. But the other one is just the incentives that, we're saying favoring rich people. If a reporter wrote something that made Jeff Bezos look really bad, or Elon Musk, or any wealthy person, or their companies, they would get called on the carpet. Their editor, if it wasn't their immediate editor, it'd be someone higher up, because Bezos would be on the phone and they'd have lawyers and they'd be yelling at them, and they won't do it again. So you get this bias that way, that if you have reporting that's against the interest of the wealthy, it's going to be corrected, guaranteed. On the other hand, if you have reporting that kind of favors the wealthy, is not informative to the vast majority of the audience, I can complain, you can complain, they don't care about us. So that's it. That's how I understand it. Again, it's a complex issue. I've followed this a long time. And I think it's rarely the case that you have an editor or a publisher calling up a reporter saying, you have to report it this way. But I think what happens is the incentives are clear. If they report it in a way that's bad for those on top, they get chewed on the carpet. If they report it in a way that's good for those on the top, just fine.
That is one of the most important statements in this discussion thus far. I mean, you just gave in effect some marching orders why the independent media must continue to grow and why it must get completely decentralized and bigger because of exactly what you said.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely essential. And it's been frustrating to me that so many progressives recognize that campaign financing corrupts politics, which of course it does. I mean, you give, Elon Musk is throwing his millions or hundreds of millions out there. Sure, that affects elections, but there's too little appreciation. What people hear between the campaign ads also affects elections. So yeah, you're going to hear the ad for this candidate or that candidate, or why the progressive is a horrible person and whatever, that will affect how you vote. But what you hear between those ads also. So I've been a big fan of having individual tax credits. If we all had $100, pick your sum, we could give it to the media outlet of our choice. That would help foster an independent media that would be very difficult to suppress and would have a huge impact on, to my view, public opinion, make people more knowledgeable. Now, some of that will go to right-wingers. That's the way it goes. But the point is, a lot of it could go to good reporting, and that would make a big difference in the world.
Very, very important statement. Now, in the article, you suggest that some tariffs could serve as tools for social bargaining. How might a progressive administration use tariffs differently? Because, we've been beaten up on tariffs, but there are reasons where it could become quite important.
Yeah, historically, both the United States and other countries have used tariffs as a major tool for development. So the United States, we had very high tariffs around the turn of the last century. I mean, I know Trump's running around saying that was the golden age. It wasn't quite the golden age, but we did have rapid economic growth, and it did help foster industry. And same is true. You can look at More recent examples, countries like South Korea and Japan, and most recently China, they have had very extensive tariffs, help build up their economies very rapidly. But the point was that they were targeted tariffs, and this is what actually, President Biden didn't get nearly the credit he deserved for this. He tried to do this in promoting electric vehicles, promoting clean energy, promoting advanced semiconductor, and they were successful. I mean, it's very clear. We had an incredible boom in factory construction under Biden. It more than doubled from where it was in 2019 before the pandemic. We've never seen anything like that. So it was an incredibly successful policy that he got almost no credit for. And I raised this with Economist. I mean, not the economists are brilliant people, but this is our area, and they don't know. So, look, it's, this isn't some wacky number. I didn't do some extensive research where I had to cut this and that and that and that. No, it's right in the national income and product accounts that's put out by the Commerce Department. It's as clear as day. We saw factory construction more than double between 2019 and 2024. That was because of well-targeted tariffs. So it was a great success. And, and unfortunately, Trump is determined to undermine it every way he can. But that was very successful use of tariffs. So it's not at all, I'd say tariffs are always and everywhere bad. You just have to think about what you're doing with them.
You bring that subject right back to the media. You said it wasn't too hard for you to find this information. Why is it that, again, that it's not out there when Donald Trump lies and says he was responsible for the manufacturing that it's occurring right now? We know that the IRA and all the other programs really sort of were the catalyst for this. But everybody sits back now and think, well, Donald Trump actually gets something done when he didn't.
Yeah, it's, it was striking because, again, obviously I was following the coverage very closely in the Biden administration, following both the policies. I had friends, who were very involved in the administration and, the coverage of it. And very early on, the media took this twist, and frankly, I date this to the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which they called the disastrous withdrawal. You could see its poll numbers plummeted after that. And I mean, I won't get off on the foreign policy, but I'll just say it was not disastrous. He got a lot of people out, which was, to my view, the main thing, to get people who worked with us whose life might be in danger, get them out. He got 125,000 out. That was pretty damn good. But in any case, his coverage took a twist to the negative, affected everything, and particularly on economics. So they highlighted all the bad news, and there was bad news. We had a pandemic, we had the supply chain problems. That was a worldwide problem. That wasn't a Joe Biden problem. That was a worldwide problem. But they blamed Biden, and they continually harped on every negative thing, ignoring, to my view, incredibly positive things. First and foremost, jobs. We got the unemployment rate down to 4%. By the end of 2021. No one thought that would happen. That was a fantastic thing. And I'd raise this with the reporters and I go, oh, well, no one cares. I go, people don't care about having jobs? I mean, that's kind of bizarre to me. And wages actually rose rapidly for those at the bottom. In fact, we had the most rapid real wage growth. So I'm accounting for it. People go, well, you have to look at prices. I'm looking at prices. So we had the most rapid real wage growth for the bottom bottom decile, bottom 10% of labor force since the 60s. That's a fantastic story. And we did see real wage growth up and down the income ladder, higher at the bottom, which is great by me, wasn't as high at the top. But that's, again, the direction was positive. And we also had, something almost completely overlooked. We had a huge explosion in people being able to work remotely, to be able to work from home, save people thousands of dollars a year in commuting cost, hours, hundreds of hours. Great thing. Almost no one talked about it. So you got this thing where, oh, Biden's a failure, Biden's a failure, Biden's a failure. And reporters were looking for ways to make that point, in some cases, even inventing it. So I remember the New York Times had an article back in the summer of 2024 talking about a two-tier economy, where it said, and it was a lengthy piece, so this wasn't a small item. It said, people at the top, they're doing pretty well, or upper middle income. But if you look at the bottom, and they found a woman who obviously wasn't doing well, her wages had barely risen, her nominal wages, so she'd fallen behind inflation. It even acknowledged that she was atypical. So they went out of their way. They found someone, and obviously in an economy with 160 million workers, of course, some people are losing. That's the world. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's the world. So they deliberately found someone who they knew was atypical to represent lower income people, lower income workers, when they could have easily found someone who had a real wage gain, wages in excess of inflation of 25% over the last 5 years. That's a big deal. Not that they're doing well. I mean, I'm not going to say someone who's earning $20 an hour in 224 and had been earning 15 an hour in 219. I'm not going to say that person's doing great, but they're doing much better. And that's a great story. I mean, I'd love to see them earning 25 an hour, but the world's not going to work that way.
Now, last two questions. What do you think this big, beautiful bill is going to do for the country as a whole from a socioeconomic standpoint? And also, how dangerous is the current level of debt?
Well, on the first point, I think we are going to see a lot of people hit low, moderate income people. And this is the healthcare issue, that you're taking away healthcare from millions. Well, the estimates are between 12 and 17 million people. Those are rough estimates. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying the nature of what's involved. There's so many things kind of up for grabs. Things will change, hopefully for the better, but they could change for the worse too. So you're taking healthcare away from millions and millions of people, and that's a really horrible story. And again, they're very cynical about that. They're saying we're not taking it away from it. Literally, Speaker Johnson said that. Trump said that. We're not taking it away from anyone. Well, no, you're saving $800 billion. That's their projections. It's kind of like you're saving $800 billion, but no one loses healthcare. How are you doing that exactly? I mean, I could tell stories where we reduce payments to drug companies and whatever, but that's not what they're doing. So a lot of people are going to lose healthcare. That's a really big deal. And part of that story too is it's an integrated system. So when you have Medicaid not making the payments, the hospitals that were getting the payments will go out of business. And that's already happening. So this isn't 0-1. It's a question of how many go out of business. A lot more will go out of business because of the cuts in the program. Also cuts the nutrition programs. They're very pernicious. So there's a lot of other things in there that are going to hit low, moderate income people. That's a very, very bad story in my view. The other part, you asked about the debt. I'm really not worried about the debt. I hate to say that.
Okay.
My good friend Jared Bernstein just had a big column in the New York Times saying how he's worried about the debt. I respect Jared. He's a good economist. He's a good friend. But I don't share that. I guess what I'd say is if we have a healthy economy, we don't have to worry about the debt. So that doesn't mean nowhere ever is it a problem. Deficits might be too high. There are issues. But the idea that if we had a strong, healthy economy, that somehow people aren't going to want to hold their debt, that doesn't make sense. Now, we may not have a strong, healthy economy because we're doing a lot of really foolish policies, the tariffs being one of them, slashing research budgets through the National Institutes of Health, National Science. Those are really, really bad policies. And Trump's anti-immigrant policies, we've all heard stories that, even not that white people should be treated differently, but the reality is it's not even just Indians, dark-skinned people, even, people coming from Germany and Norway are being harassed at immigration. People won't come to the United States. I mean, that hurts tourism, but it also, we're talking about scientific exchange. These people are going to go to other countries. So when we're talking about the top scientists in the world, where we're going to have innovations, that's going to be in Europe, it's going to be in China, it's going to be in India. It's not going to be in the United States. So when I'm saying, should we worry about the debt? Well, if we don't have a strong, healthy economy, yes. But the big problem is we don't have a strong, healthy economy, and Trump's policies are really undermining the strength of the U.S. economy.
Now, Dean, the question I always ask last is, what should I have asked you that I didn't, or what would you like to tell the audience?
Well, I could go on forever, but I'll just say, it is unfortunate. I wouldn't have expected to be in this situation, even with Donald Trump in the White House, because some of the things we're seeing are just so destructive. I was mentioning before about attacking scientific research, attacking scientists. These are really, really big problems, which, unfortunately, we'll see the impact more in the long term. I'm saying unfortunately because, when you see something right away, people react to it. But when we see we're not having the innovation we should be having, we're falling behind the rest of the world, and that's 2, 3, 4 years out, people are less quick to react to it. So that's the biggest problem in my view. And, we're going 180 degrees the wrong way right now.
Dean Baker, American macroeconomist who co-founded the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thanks a lot for having me on. I enjoyed it.
spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.